Education Technology Africa. Only one platform brings these top trends together at a time when they have become more important than ever.
The EdTech Monday program started out in the late 2019 in Rwanda as a conversation among EdTech entrepreneurs. It has since grown to include other stakeholders and scaled to 4 additional countries: Kenya, Ghana, Uganda, and Nigeria. In addition to these country programs, in February of 2021, we launched an Africa-wide EdTech Monday program in partnership with CNBC.
A very warm welcome to EdTech Monday Regional Edition. I'm Julie Gishuru, and it's a great pleasure to have you with us.
The EdTech Monday programs brought together policymakers and implementers, EdTech entrepreneurs, civil society, school leaders, teachers, learners, and parents to discuss how to harness the power of technology to transform education systems and to enable continuous learning during the COVID-19 pandemic. These programs have and continue to democratize education technology, ensuring that all stakeholders are talking to each other and together finding ways to improve learning outcome on the continent.
In 2021, EdTech Monday Africa brought you candid discussions about how education technologies can drive learning in Africa. When schools were closed, education disrupted, and during the biggest continent-wide experiment on digital learning delivery in history, we dove into issues from access to devices, internet, and resources.
We took that bold step of reframing education in a state, particularly at the foundational stage, where we decided to introduce technology into our educational system. We got the technology partners, and we essentially, with the help of the World Bank and partners, we have reframed education by first introducing technology en masse, systems-wide, making sure that we retrain the teachers, we give them the technology devices. So the teachers in the classrooms today have their tablets, their lesson notes are loaded. So we have a bit more control over, the pedagogy and the curriculum and the learning outcomes. And the results are there 3 years after to show that the kids are now learning, kids in Edo State are learning almost at 70% of the rate of their colleagues in advanced countries.
In Nigeria, access to education, has improved over time in many states, but quality is an issue. So I think there has to be bold steps in terms of investing in quality. I mean, there are segments of Nigeria where access is still a problem. The northern part of Nigeria, where you have a lot of conflict and violence events, and many kids are in internally displaced person camps. Many kids are at home, schools closed down, even not related to COVID. And so you still have access problems in some of those areas. And then, of course, social and gender norms in some parts of the country as well that keep girls at home and do not prioritize education for girls. But I think in terms of quality, we need to do more. I think there has to be a lot of investments in quality. And of course, investments have to be appropriate, they have to be well targeted. So you need to, first of all, understand where we are and what sort of investments, because investments need to be well targeted and well delivered. What sort of investments do we need in different areas? It's going to be different for different states of the country or different countries on the continent. So I think governments need to really prioritize funding for education, and in particular, funding for teachers' salaries, teachers' capacity building, because I think the evidence is out there that teachers are the most critical factor in the learning process.
I think it's important to realize that technology goes only so far. It's as good as its execution. It can empower teachers, it can be used, but it can also be used to limit teachers and their agency and their judgment and creativity. So when done well, digital training tools should strengthen and enrich pedagogic practices, enable teachers to use different teaching styles, multimodal content to engage children with varying learning needs and levels and behaviors. It should also enhance interaction and imagination. And if we don't link all of that to learning outcomes, we keep churning out subject and theoretical experts and show high rates of success and completion of online trainings not necessarily translating impact in classrooms.
In Uganda, we are advocating actually for changing this perspective of looking at technology first, but first looking at the teachers. And that's why Uganda in 2019 actually passed a policy, a national teacher policy. And this national teacher policy actually emphasizes a lot to do with building the skills and the capacity of the teachers to integrate, to use technologies in teaching and learning, and to have new pedagogical approaches introduced in the classroom, and so on. So there are some specific examples indeed, but they may not be actually integrating technology within the teaching and learning, but they use the pedagogical principles of technology, of using distance education within the teaching and learning. And indeed, in Uganda, as you see, most of the distance learning programs normally tend to look at education programs.
Technology won't change the importance of great pedagogical approaches, right? We won't say, oh, you can sidestep, how you engage learners and how you motivate them and how you actually explain concepts and build inquiry. That's not going to change without thoughtful teacher preparation, without thinking through and developing a plan for teacher. What's expanding and what's changing is this idea that now how can I use technology as a means to empower and to elevate learning as opposed to be the tool that creates, it's just a medium, right? It's not the tool that creates learning. And I fear is quite often funders and policymakers, let's throw this technology at something or at someone, and magically all the issues will disappear. It becomes a silver bullet to solve all the problems. What I do see working really well is whenever technologies are being implemented, is if folks really think about the context in which it's being implemented. For example, if I know that I'm working with teachers in an upcountry setting and I recognize that data is not going to always be accessible or is going to be it's not going to be affordable, it's making sure that I have some online, offline system or tool where I can leverage learning. So I love the proliferation of platforms, these simple learning management systems that have started popping up throughout the continent, where we're getting people to design teacher-facing information and experiences. You only need to tap in and download once in a while. For example, I think of Chalkboard, for example, in Ghana, leveraging their work, and we've used that within Still for a bit of our work as well, recognizing that, if I'm really deep into an area where teachers won't have access to internet, let's have some way of downloading first.
We need to have women sitting at the leadership level, at the decision-making level, in order to ensure that the products of the research, whether that's policy, whether that's actual products that end up being used in the EdTech industry, they must have the woman's voice there. This will ensure that all the issues that disproportionately affect women are being addressed. I think the reason why we don't actually see that many women and female voices at the leadership and at the decision-making level is number one, the education pipeline. Girls and women tend to be the ones that drop out at every level. So between primary to secondary, from secondary up into higher education. And then when they do get to higher education, they're not provided with the right mentorship that is tailored for women. So this is the reason why, even in sub-Saharan Africa, we only have 31% of the researchers being women. And in Kenya, we're actually only at 26%. So there is still a way to go. We need to be able to provide tailored support for women and provide an environment where they can thrive.
We see a move where a lot more women are getting involved in STEM. What we do at Expo for Young Scientists, we set a target that the minimum participation, we must have a minimum of 50% girls participating in Expo, and we exceed the target every year. So we go out and we encourage girls to participate. Quite often, they feel it's a boy's domain, being a scientist or an engineer. We must dispel that. I would take Apiwe and Rita, and I will ask them to go and talk to the girls. They don't want to see me talking about getting girls. They want to see a girl that looks like them, talks like them, comes from a similar environment, and has made it into university and is now a scientist or an engineer. So we focus on getting those role models in front of these girls. And we have a mentorship program. So we do have many women who are undergraduates that have a cohort of students that they work with. And we ensure, now if a girl sees another lady as a mentor, they would attend. They won't feel intimidated. So we get a lot of girls involved, and we have up to 59% female participation in all our activities. And firstly, the girls must be, we must stress to the fact that they can be anything they want to be. There is no job or career that is set aside for men. And if they believe in themselves, we are there, and there's many organizations there to help our girls to get there.
I always take an example of how the digital space has enabled anything. Yeah, you can conduct a lab, you can even access some labs somewhere and learn from there without having the constraint and the barrier of not having a physical lab. So we need to make sure that education institutions are collaborating, that they are putting in place, but they are also making available those infrastructure they have to other institutions to be able to use them, because the digital world has made it easy, and it's now you can now do a course online and feel comfortable, and even your degree is recognized.
Unlike teachers who know the different types of learners that exist, parents do not know the learning modes or learning styles of their learners. There are those who learn by experiencing, by doing, by hearing, by all that. So we want to bring in programs for parental empowerment so that the parents can be able to get to know my child is a learner of this type. That way then they're able to help the child. Then the other things that they needed to know is, in the learning process, what really happens? How are they able to encourage and support that? Again, parental empowerment programs. So we brought that on board. But again, we used radio, we used television to pass it across. We had some on the Kenya Education Crowd and even in the YouTube to encourage parents and for parents to learn from them. Now, there are these ones we are saying are not interested. Now, the important thing and what we found working in some centers is that through the opinion leaders, the traditional way of thinking from the local administration, the chiefs and the rest, some were able to engage and even have centers of learning. Now, again, remember at this time, people are not supposed to get together, but you could still get some 5 children getting to those centers and learning. To encourage these parents who would say are not prioritizing that, then we need to engage them by telling them and showing them through the various ways of communicating with them. Radio, community, so that we can tell them there's a difference between those who are learning and those who are not learning. And this is the advantage of the ones who are learning, and actually there are some learning outcomes that are getting out of it. Challenging for all of us now is that evidence-based improvement in learning outcomes from remote learning is not yet consolidated.
Now, starting February 2022, EdTech Monday is back and bolder, bringing you in-depth dialogue with individuals at the front lines of delivering education, of developing learning technologies, of creating policy, and ultimately of driving change.
Teaching used to be viewed like a profession where the teacher just stands in front of the students and you become the source of all information and knowledge. Things really change because the learner that time is not the learner that we have today. These people are exposed to so much technology, source of information is so much close to them, they're able to get it very fast, and therefore we had to transform. I, as a teacher, adopted the teaching using technology so that I also keep in touch with the growing child and so that you still remain relevant to their guidance. Largely, we moved from lecture method, where the student used to sit back and listen to us, take the all important notes, of course, all important in quotes, because largely they could not follow. We adopted the use of technology, and the teacher now turns the role of a guide. You become a person that walks with the student and guides them in their path of learning.
I think it's important to realize that technology goes only so far, and it's as good as its execution. It can empower teachers, it can be used, but it can also be used to limit teachers and their agency and their judgment and creativity. So when done well, digital training tools should strengthen and enrich pedagogic practices, enable teachers to use different teaching styles, multimodal content to engage children with varying learning needs and levels and behaviors. It should also enhance interaction and imagination. And if we don't link all of that to learning outcomes, we keep churning out subject and theoretical experts and show high rates of success and completion of online trainings, not necessarily translating impact in classrooms.
Thinking about 2020 and the unprecedented disruption in learning, we know that disruptions will happen and we need to develop mechanisms to have resilience to help us survive such disruptions in the future. And EdTech becomes one of those critical tools to be able to continue learning when kids are not able to attend school. And these resilient systems are built, let's say, in peacetime, not necessarily in crisis. So that means that going forward, we need to have a lot of focus in developing EdTech platforms that work with existing, within the existing school systems during the school term, after the school term. And when these solutions mature, then it means if there's a significant disruption, the kind that was caused by COVID, then the education system is able to rely on this.
There's 1.1 million tablets out there in schools. And we went through a whole year of COVID without anyone banging on doors and screaming about why are we not using these tablets. So, let's use the resources we have. Let's really unlock and leverage the potential that the technology can have, that we've already done so much of the groundwork for. But let's also, let's challenge ourselves not to default. Because during this COVID period, when all children were at home, they weren't going to school, what did we tell our children? Go to the radio, listen to the radio for content, watch TV. And so, we really need to challenge that. The thing about conventional wisdom is often it's a lot more than it is wisdom. So what is really the best thing we can do? What is the best thing we can do for our children? And it might not be the safest thing. It might not be the thing that we know. It might not be the things that we've done before, but really choose to challenge and, spread our wings and nudge our way and do things a little differently and try different things, try new things, because the world is moving at this kind of breakneck speed. So let's not always rush to go back to business as usual, because that usual wasn't so great to begin with.
Policymakers need to take the lead. They need to make sure that they actually initiate what we call public-private policy dialogue. And this is something that is happening in a number of countries. So that's really number one. The policy maker needs to take the lead, followed by the private sector. Because when you talk about demand, the demand is from the private sector. And I noticed again, some of the countries have initiated this kind of exercise, making sure that the private sector play their role. They cannot just be sitting waiting for skilled people to engage. They need also to contribute and make sure that training are actually tailored towards addressing their needs. And of course, as we move into regionalization, as we come up with this new Africa free trade markets, indeed, this is where the African Union becomes so critical. We also need to make sure that there are standards that are established between countries so that a young graduate from Nairobi can move to Lusaka, can move to Douala and be able to get a job.
In 2022, we will be building on our work and we will integrate a feedback mechanism that will gauge the impact of these conversations on the reality on the ground. We want to make sure that the recommendations coming out of this discussion are being implemented and that they have the desired outcome. We will also be taking on the issue of inclusivity. How do we ensure that we're building back better and no one is left behind?
Join us for these conversations on transforming the future of the continent digitally through education, one young person at a time. EdTech Monday Africa every month on CNBC and live on Facebook at Young Africa Works.